welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish on April 16th. Squalin, please to Lukimuk, Squamish, Ulamio. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish people. May I have a motion to adopt the amended agenda? We have a late proclamation request that was added to the agenda. That's number 4.2. And also a late addition to the agenda was under 11.1 is the Vancouver Coastal Health final collaboration agreement. So moved by Councillor Pettition, second by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Any notice of motion? Seeing none. We do have one delegation this evening, and that is Pam Gliatis. So I'll have you come forward, Pam. And this is our letter of request. Letter of support request.
Yes. I'm a delegation of one. I'm here to ask for an indication through a letter mostly of support for an initiative we have the opportunity to get funding for called a Local Immigration Partnership, or LIP. Some of you may know. I've been involved in offering settlement services in Squamish for the last, I believe, 8 years now. And we just finished applying for the next 5 years. And as part of that call for proposals, there is a kind of a part 2 that allows us to kind of raise our heads from our desks and the kind of day-to-day work we do in settlement and look around and look at the community and look at other sectors in the community and maybe do some research about the current needs of immigrants. We rely on the census, as everyone does, which is always out of date. And our day-to-day experience is that the diversity and the numbers of immigrants coming to Squamish is growing. We provided, it's been our local program, we're partnered with programs that Capilano is involved with in the corridor, so Sunshine Coast, Pemberton, and Whistler. But in our local community, we served 200 unique individual immigrants last year, which doesn't reflect, I mean, one person can result in many visits, much involvement, or one person can just be a one-visit thing. We have the equivalent of a full-time settlement worker, and we have a part-time outreach worker. And so we don't have the time on a day-to-day basis to really go out and create larger stakeholder groups that, and we've done quite, I think, a significant amount of work in raising awareness of the diversity in Squamish just through our festival and other things, but this would give us an opportunity to really focus and to get some resources to really focus on helping the community to become aware of the diversity here and to really look at the needs of newcomers. Things, I know, for example, that there's been great recognition of Squamish as an entrepreneurial community recently. And I've been looking at the information and the marketing that Squamish is engaged in. But for the most part, immigrants are not addressed in terms of what impact they have on this community, whether it's important to retain immigrants once they're here, and are we retaining them, or are they coming and going based on the cost of living here? You know, information that's 3 years out of date is not very helpful in terms of creating supports and meeting needs and identifying gaps. And so this gives us the capacity, hopefully, if we're funded, to look at some of that. But primarily what it does is allow us to reach out to a broader sector so that we can engage business, people, entrepreneurs, employers, and other providers that are not directly involved with providing immigrant services. At the moment, the group of providers we work with is ISS, that provides formal language training, the library, which is very important for immigrants. We work with community services and Work BC, but obviously there's a whole other array of groups in the community that you know, immigrants benefit from being involved with those other groups and connected to them. And there is a whole sense of the importance of a community that's growing, of looking at what makes us friendly, you know, what makes us welcoming, what are some of the things we might overlook in being as welcoming as we can. So one of the things that comes out of this opportunity is the ability to look at anti-racism work, not because, you know, we have a high level of racism here, but because generally in the world there is a rise in kind of anti-immigrant sentiment, and we tend to stereotype people, and so it would be important to try and do some public awareness and education to support different the community in preventing those things from arising here. One example of this kind of work and how great it can be is the North Shore Immigration, I think it's called the Immigration Inclusion Partnership. They've had this funding for a number of years, and they've done amazing research and work. So if you ever want to look at their website, it's nsiip.com or .org. So the outline I gave you just gives you, it's basically what the funder has put out in terms of the kinds of activities we can get funding for. And, you know, we already have, I thought I'd have trouble filling 5 minutes, obviously don't. Sorry, I'll stop soon for questions. We have a group that's been meeting in Squamish for over 20 years called it was the Squamish Literacy Coalition. And latterly it's been called the Dream Makers Coalition, because that's what we kind of help people do. And the focus has been literacy and language, that's that aspect. But this would expand that group and build on it to really do a much more broad and comprehensive look at what it takes to remain a welcoming and inclusive community. Okay. That's off the top of my head. Pretty good, huh?
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Any questions, council? So the fourth pillar of our strategic plan is neighborhood connectivity and community connectivity. And I think something like the local immigration partnership is something that fits into that, is wanting people to feel connected to their new community as soon as they arrive here. Certainly, I've had a small taste of what that can be like, supporting one of the Syrian women who came to Squamish and working with her on literacy. And it's been more a rewarding experience for me. I think she's taught me more than I've taught her. But it does make you reflect on how friendly our community is and how do we keep that as we grow.
That's really good.
I will also note that Squamish just a few weeks ago was selected for a provincial pilot program called Provincial Nominee Program, Entrepreneurial Regional Pilot. And I think that efforts with the settlement services are really critical to making those sorts of programs function. So happy to support this.
Someone want to move a letter of support?
I'll move the motion with the red letter.
Second by Councillor Anderson.
So I just add in terms of, so as I've indicated in yellow in the document I sent you, so the letter of support can indicate a range of ways that you want to be supported. Ideally, we'd love to have somebody from council participate as a member of, or two people can share it or whatever, of the group as we form it. But if that's not possible, then certainly being involved in terms of receiving information and being part of activities is, but it would be great if there was some indication in the letter that the council is willing to be an active member of this group as we create it.
Well, we'll discuss that with staff and we'll figure that out as the funding comes through.
Great. And the other note is we have to have this letter by, well, the deadline's the 30th. They didn't give us much time.
On it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very
All
much
right,
for the
call the
opportunity.
question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for coming.
All right. Thank you. We'll come back to ask for money sometime soon as well. Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, we had a late proclamation request. Unfortunately, delegation couldn't be here this evening, but Council proclaimed May 2019 as Squamish Hospital Awareness Month in the District of Squamish, and this came from the Hospital Foundation. Councilor Rich moves that, seconded by Councilor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Consideration of any unscheduled public attendance. So this would be anyone who has something they need to address before council that can't wait 2 weeks. Seeing none, we don't have any public hearings tonight, so we're on to item 8A. First reading of District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw CD 95, 1145, 1155, 1165, Wilson Crescent. I will turn it over to staff to take us through the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with the District of Squamish. Tonight I am presenting to you a rezoning amendment bylaw number 2588-2018 for 3 properties located at 1145, 1155, and 1165 Wilson Crescent. The subject lands are located in the Wilson Crescent neighborhood and are designated residential neighborhood in the official community plan. The application, if approved, would be subject to Development Permit Area 3, the Universal Guidelines, and Development Permit Area 2, Protection from Flood Hazard. The properties are currently zoned Multiple Unit Residential 1, RM1. A single unit dwelling occupies each of the 3 properties. The majority of the surrounding properties are also zoned RM1, with the primary form of housing being single detached residential. The property to the north is developed with townhomes, Arbutus Grove, as is the parcel to the south, the current. 5 parcels nearby are also zoned RS3, small lot residential, and are developed with single unit detached dwellings. This section of Wilson Crescent is a one-way street with a shared space for cyclists and pedestrians that is delineated with paint in certain areas. Located close to the downtown, the Wilson Crescent neighborhood has been zoned for multiple unit residential for several decades, although many properties continue to be used for single detached housing. The district received a number of development applications and pre-applications in the Wilson Crescent area in 2017 and 2018, and initiated a planning review of the current zoning and development issues prior to proceeding with any applications. Through the planning review, the Wilson Crescent microplan was developed and adopted by Council in October of 2018. The microplan provides a summary of conditions, planning and service issues, and contains a series of guidelines to manage future development applications in the area. The microplan can be reviewed in attachment 2 of your report this evening. The original application came in as 3 different concepts for townhouse layouts. At this point, rezoning applications on Wilson Crescent were put on hold to initiate the planning process. The first version, which is shown above, sought to rezone to a density equivalent of RM2, multiple residential 2, or higher. In this version, a townhome development of 28 townhomes with an FAR of 0.8 was proposed. In the second and third version, the applicant proposed an FAR of 0.9 and 24 units, with the drive aisles potentially covered. Following the completion of the Wilson Crescent microplan, the applicant revised the drawings and the housing code and resubmitted. So to come back to the plan, it called for a mix of forms of density in the area of Wilson Crescent, but also called for different forms of housing than traditional townhomes. The plan also directed lot consolidations of 3 or more to rezone specifically to allow council to consider what density would be appropriate for the neighborhood. Following the completion of the plan, the applicant resubmitted their application. The applicant brought forward a concept for 2 clusters of stacked townhomes above a shared parking area. This application included 5 stories, inclusive of a single-story parkade that was partially sunk. The application sought an FAR of 1.4 to achieve 70 units. Staff did not feel that the density and massing was in line with the Wilson Crescent microplan. It did not think the second parking garage was feasible. The microplan calls for upper stories to be set back from the property line, which this concept did not do. The applicant then brought forward version 4, which brought the FAR down even more to 1.2 and 48 units. The applicant was still proposing to sink the parking garage below grade and still sought a 5th story for rooftop access. Staff suggested that the density and massing was still too high. The upper stories were still not set back and did not provide a gentle transition from the existing neighborhood. The following will outline what is now proposed based on staff feedback to date. The applicant is proposing a rezoning that would allow for 2 3-story apartment buildings on top of a shared parkade. Daycare space is proposed in the courtyard. The applicant approximates at 48 apartment units with an average size of 975 square feet would be built, though the size range is still unknown. Staff are of the opinion that the proposal is appropriate as the site is not dominated by vehicle circulation, as it would be with a traditional townhome development. The applicant is proposing to build to Step 5 of the BC Energy Step Code, which is comparable to a passive house. The zone allows for a maximum height of 10.68 meters, which is the permitted height of the residential 1 and 2 and the multiple residential 1 and 2 zones. With a 1.5 meter height bonus for achieving Step 5 of the BC Step Code, the maximum that the applicant could build to is 12.18 meters, or 40 feet. For context, that is 3 feet taller than our reduced road and 9 feet taller than the current. Because the applicant is unable to complete the necessary study to demonstrate sufficiently to the district that the parkade could be sunk below grade, staff directed the applicant to bring the entire parkade to grade so the rezoning could capture the maximum height that could be achieved. The third residential story, the top story, is stepped back from the second residential story by 45 degrees on all elevations. The applicant has provided the above rendering to represent the project's potential massing. This rendering was created to convey to council and the public what the building may look like. The final form and character of the building will be determined through the development permit process if this rezoning is successful. And then this illustration shows the top story setback with a bit more detail. The above slide illustrates the density and the height of the proposal compared to some of the other examples in Squamish, including Arbutus Grove, the townhomes on Buckley Avenue, the current, also on Wilson Crescent, and the Breeze development in the North Yards. And this slide shows some of the other perspectives of the rendering. Again, this rendering is created to convey to council and the public what the building may look like. Above is the proposed site plan. The applicant is proposing an interior side setback of 3.9 meters, a rear setback of 3.9 meters, and a front setback of 7.2 meters. Statutory right-of-ways are proposed along all setbacks to allow for paved public access throughout the site. A portion of the courtyard will also be secured as publicly accessible with a statutory right-of-way. The rezoning to an apartment use with shared open space with an elevated courtyard enables staff to see statutory right-of-ways over all the setbacks. If the applicant had built townhomes under the existing zoning, there would not have been the opportunity to secure these pedestrian connections. One of the comments from the public at the public information meeting was about loss of pedestrian connectivity throughout Wilson Crescent since the development of townhomes, where an informal trail network used to exist. This is the first opportunity to try and reestablish a more formalized pedestrian network throughout Wilson Crescent. The above table highlights the differences between the RM1, RM3, and proposed CD95 zone. The proposed rezoning proposes the density of the RM3 zone but the height of the RM1 zone. The applicant is proposing slightly smaller side and front setbacks and a reduced rear setback. The reduced side and rear setbacks accommodate the required parking to ensure the applicant is able to provide sufficient parking on site for future residents. The zone has a maximum height of 10.68 meters. The applicant has indicated that they may exceed that by 1.5 meters. This is permitted in the zoning bylaw as a height bonus for applicants that exceed the applicable base step in the building bylaw when the FCL is 1.5 meters above the height datum and all habitable space meets the FCL. The developer is offering a community amenity contribution of $259,000. The above detail simply highlights how the CAC was determined for the proposed rezoning. The applicant is proposing the cash contribution based on proposed square footage. This includes contributions towards critical amenities, publicly accessible active transportation, and park amenities. This will be secured in the land development agreement. The applicant is also proposing to secure 5% of the gross floor area as market rental, secured with a housing agreement, so 2,300 square feet. Public access secured through statutory right-of-ways along all setbacks, and 1,500 square feet of dedicated daycare space. The Wilson Crescent microplan includes specific language regarding the retention of heritage in the Wilson Crescent neighborhood. Section 4.20K calls for the preservation of existing heritage values. The property at 1145 Wilson Crescent was constructed in the 1930s and is identified in the preliminary Squamish Heritage Inventory of 1993 as suggested as a site for further research. The applicant has proposed a signage program along the public pathways depicting the Wilson Crescent neighborhood's history and integrating some of the design features into the new development to be secured in the land development agreement. Staff are of the opinion that replicating unique features such as the eyebrow dormer into the new development and at street level may be of value. Prior to considerations of third reading, staff request that the applicant complete a limited traffic impact assessment to capture details regarding pedestrian safety, including vehicle speeds and traffic calming, lane width, delineated pedestrian areas, protection for cyclists, queuing at Buckley Avenue, and potential intersection improvements at the Buckley Avenue exit that address improving pedestrian safety and reduce instances of voters entering against the one-way at this location. This would inform the Wilson Crescent streetscape design to be completed by the applicant's consulting engineer prior to adoption of this bylaw. Finally, staff recognize the need for a pull-out drop-off area for the proposed childcare facility. Staff propose that this can be determined following the traffic impact assessment and will likely be placed in the parklet area. The photos above are of the section of Wilson Crescent with the delineated pedestrian path, which is currently 1.5 meters wide. Staff believe that with a detailed design, there may be room to, at a minimum, expand the width of this path and narrow the drive aisle while maintaining a safe movement for fire access vehicles. As it relates to Wilson Crescent, staff have determined that there is a 10-meter right-of-way. This leaves enough room for a parking lane, drive aisle, pedestrian movement, and a separation between pedestrians. The traffic impact assessment will help determine the appropriate width of each of these uses. The image shows how a better separation uses could occur following this work. Staff are also seeking confirmation of water service requirements. A significant water upgrade to this location may be required. The applicant had originally proposed sinking the parkade below grade to reduce the overall height. However, the District of Squamish floodplain bylaw states that the parkade must be above the seasonal high water table. The district requires hydrological testing over the wet season to confirm the level of the water table prior to accepting a parkade below grade. The applicant has indicated that they wish to pursue this testing if the rezoning is accepted and attempt to sink the parkade below grade. The applicant mostly meets the guidelines of the Wilson Crescent micro plan, though there are still some guidelines that the proposal does not meet. Staff note that while density above 0.6 is not supported in the RM1 zone, the Wilson Crescent microplan directs properties consolidating more than 2 properties to rezone. The intent of the limited lot consolidation and subsequent required rezoning allows council to consider whether the proposed scale of development is compatible with the neighborhood. Section 4.12 indicates that buildings should be a maximum of 3 stories. The upper story is set back as mandated by the plan. The maximum height is in line with what is currently permitted in the zoning. Section 4.20I calls for an increased side yard setback where new 3-story or higher buildings are proposed adjacent to lower density and height uses. The parkade is only set back 3.9 meters from the interior lot line. However, the residential stories meet the setback of 4.57 and the top setback is set back. If the hydrological study shows that the parkade could be sunk, then the applicant will better meet this guideline. The project was posted to the district's development showcase. 62 requests for public information meeting were made, 53 of which also included comments. A public information meeting was held on March 13th of 2019 and was held at the Squamish Adventure Center. There were approximately 30 attendees. 12 additional comments have been received to date. Comments are included in your report package tonight as attachment 3. Comments from the public primarily include concerns regarding the potential increased traffic and exacerbated parking issues on Wilson Crescent. Staff highlight that the applicant is not proposing a variance to the required parking at this time and that a traffic impact assessment is required. Other concerns were regarding the building's form and apartment, the height and the density of the development. Public notification procedures will be undertaken should council confirm the public hearing. Staff recommend that council approve the first reading of the District of Squamish zoning bylaw, amendment bylaw number 2588, and that prior to scheduling a public hearing, a traffic impact assessment be completed, and that prior to adoption, the conditions on the screen are completed, including the execution and registration of the land development agreement, securing the community amenity contribution. Alternatively, council could refer the rezoning back to staff.
Thank you. Councilor Rees.
Thank you. So you might have even answered my questions actually since I put my hand up. With respect to the parking garage, I take it then there is still a possibility that it would be wholly or partially sunk, depending on this study coming out, which would reduce the height I take it. But the height right now, do I understand correctly that the height right now is the maximum height and the micro plan plus the 1.5 bonus? Is that a correct statement?
Through you, Mayor Elliott, the maximum height is the equivalent of the current zoning and of the neighboring zonings. And the 1.5 meter height bonus is achievable in all developments that have a flood construction level 1.5 meters above the natural grade.
And this proposal, the way it is now, is within that then?
Yes.
It is. Thank you.
Councilor French, and then Councilor Hurd.
In much of the feedback that we've received, I noted that a number of people were writing that this is a 5-story project. It's my understanding it's 4 stories. Which is it, 4 or 5?
Through you, Mayor Elliott, as the previous slide showed, the original application or the third version of the application when it came in at 5 stories, and through working through the public comments, the applicant proceeded to then reduce it to 4 stories.
Okay. Follow up. Yeah, I believe I saw in the report that the proponent came with the original proposal and staff suggested the proponent revisit the proposal and increase the density. Is that assessment correct?
If I may, through you, Mayor, answer this question. What happened was the original submission was for a townhouse form, and we encouraged the applicant to consider different forms of density. So not specifically to increase the density, but to consider a mix of either townhouses and apartments, or more leaning towards the apartment density, because we're a little bit concerned of the existing zoning in the area and what it could do to the redevelopment of this neighborhood, which is, you know, a single lane driveway with townhouses, rows after row after row, which increases kind of traffic concerns because you get more access points along Wilson Crescent, and kind of keeps the housing stock very unilateral in the neighborhood. So yeah, we suggested to explore other forms of density.
Thank you.
Councilor Herford.
Thank you. I read the like Councillor French touched on, a lot of the feedback cited the 5-story proposal, which isn't what we're discussing here. And some of the other ones that didn't specifically cite the height may have felt the way that they did because they felt that it was 5. I'm curious at what point we sort of reset here, and before we go forward with this, we have another opportunity to engage with the public, which I suppose could be the next public hearing on it, or if that kind of feels like a false start to me, in that the public's not working with the full information. So 3 pieces to that, I feel, is just the scope of the project. You know, doesn't seem like it's been represented in the comments. Also, if we approve this at this point, I'm not sure what motivation the proponent has to pursue the sinking of the garage. There would be I don't see what would the advantage be at this point to the proponent to consider down that path, given that we would effectively approve the height limits. Can you speak to that actually? Just stop there.
For you, Mayor. I will answer the question. So the public information meeting that was held not too long ago did have the latest height information, and it did, I was there, it did sound like to a few people that was a surprise. So perhaps, some of the comments are still lingering from the previous design, but the proponent did hold a new or a public information meeting with the latest design. The only thing that we didn't have at that point was the renderings of what this could actually look like at the street level. So we had the kind of cross sections of the building, but not what it would potentially look like from the street. And in terms of the other question on the parkade, so the proponent, if this proposal proceeds, will be required to lower the parkade as much as possible, as much as the floodplain bylaw allows. It will depend on this hydrological study.
So that,
And that could be done through the land development agreement.
and then the traffic was a was a reoccurring theme in all the comments and also at the meeting. I'm glad to see that included. But I'd like to know more about that before I go forward with this approval of this. I'm having a hard time sort of reconciling those two things. That report could tell us things that so I suppose we're doing first reading here. I'm not quite sure we're at a procedural reading with that. Seems like I'm missing some information.
Yeah, so first reading gives council a chance to put forward suggestions for changes they'd like to see before second reading. Gives an opportunity for us to ask a lot of questions. Obviously, staff are actually looking for our guidance at this point, as is the developer. So this is the chance to really ask questions and
Okay, I'm gonna let it go. I'll come back to it.
Celtic Stoner, then Pettingill, then Anderson.
Thank you. My first point is just a clarification. One, I would like to acknowledge the proponent's willingness to voluntarily build to a step 5 of the energy code. I think that's really promising to see those projects come forward. Building off on Councilor Reese's questions, is the proposal as it currently stands taking advantage of the 1.5 meter density or height bonus or not?
Through your mayor, yes, the application is taking advantage of the 1.5 meter height bonus.
And so then my follow-up question was, it seems, so the max lot coverage for CD95 is 75%, which seems like a pretty significant increase from the other two lot coverages, 33 and 50%. Can you speak a little bit to if that lot coverage is really needed at this point? And that kind of goes hand in hand with the requested variances for the setbacks, especially on the interior side setbacks.
Through your mayor, the lot coverage reflects the covering of the parkade, which creates more open space for future residents to use. So the trade-off from that perspective, from staff's perspective, made sense. Whereas if they were achieving the same height and density without that lot coverage, you would likely lose the open space. So it was sort of a balancing of needs on that end. And then as to the interior side setbacks, so currently the residential stories meet the 4.57 meter interior side setback of the RM1 zone. However, the parkade does go to the 3.9 meter setback. That is just to accommodate the parking that is required. One of the biggest feedback items that staff heard was a concern about parking on Wilson Crescent. So the applicant is proposing a shared parkade and meeting the parking as the zoning bylaw requires at this time.
Thanks. And then one final question with regards to the traffic impact assessment study. I think is going to be critical, and I'm just curious in terms of kind of timelines there. Are we actually able to do a traffic impact assessment study before we know if the parkade can be sunk or not? So from my perspective, that changes the way that vehicles will actually travel through. especially depending on where access is to the potential childcare facility. And so how do those pieces fall in line with regards to when we do the traffic impact?
Through you, Mayor Elliott, the traffic impact assessment could look at the impact of a sunken versus a non-sunken parkade. The hydrological study cannot be done until the wet season begins again in the fall. So there would be a big lag that way. The engineering's primary concerns as it related to traffic was in terms of pedestrian safety, queuing at the intersection, and individuals entering the wrong way on the intersection. So the primary motivation was to be able to find opportunities for intersection improvements and ways to increase pedestrian and cyclist safety on Wilson Crescent. But again, my understanding is they could look at both scenarios.
In the micro plan, in comparing this project to the micro plan, it mentioned that nothing is proposed in relation to item 4.20G, which is habitat improvements and other possible upgrades to the Wilson Slough riparian area and so on. Now, I don't think this property specifically borders on that. Is that why that is not proposed, or was the intent that every redevelopment contribute to that, or can you maybe speak to that?
If I may, through you, Mayor. The intent was that it wasn't an expectation that every property would contribute to it, that some properties would, some wouldn't. The plan wasn't specific in which properties would. What happened after, not long after the Wilson Crescent neighborhood plan was adopted, was the district adopted the new community amenity contribution policy, which prioritized critical amenities. So council, this council or future council could decide what that cash contribution that the applicant is proposing could be used for, or could direct this development to redirect some of those efforts away from the cash contribution towards improvements in the neighborhood.
You may have preempted my next question, but I'll still ask for clarification. When I looked at the microplan, it had a list of items, prioritized items for community benefit for new zonings, and I didn't see daycare in that list. So I'm wondering how we arrived at a daycare as a community amenity or benefit.
If I may, through you, Mayor. So childcare is something that we are prioritizing now in every development proposal that's of larger scale. Particularly in this area, there is a childcare space or a childcare facility on Buckley. However, we don't know how long it's going to be there, and this being potentially a quite dense neighborhood in the future as properties redevelop, staff felt that it was important to include space in a central location in this neighborhood where it could potentially be a walkable place for people in the neighborhood to use the childcare facility. So this, although the CC policy doesn't specifically call it out, we know that it's an urgent need in Squamish.
Final, if I understood the micro plan correctly, like I understand council has flexibility with rezoning and so on to alter height and so on allowances, but I got the sense that with the micro plan it was expecting that the higher buildings would be in the northwest sort of horn of the Wilson Crescent area, and this seems to be outside of that. Am I sort of misunderstanding the intent there, or can you?
Through you, Mayor. No, that's absolutely correct. It is anticipated that the higher buildings will be further north, kind of northwest. We felt that with the upper story setback and potential sinking of the parkade or partial sinking, that this still achieves the vision of the plan, which is kind of low-rise density.
Councilor Anderson?
I have a question regarding building heights, but I'd just like to first state that my major concern is with the concept of the daycare, childcare, and commercial uses on Wilson Crescent. And I make that point because traditionally in this neighborhood, and I include Denville, the location for such amenities has been on the east side of Buckley, where we have Newport Landing today and at the corner of Carson Place. And logistically, because my concern is traffic, that is the superior, should be perhaps a better location for these types of commercial amenities, including childcare. So my concern is traffic, and that's my key concern. But I'm also wondering about the lot consolidation that we gather is taking place further along on the west side of Wilson Crescent, and whether that consolidation and a future proposal there could potentially involve the same building height. Theoretically, could a proposal come along and be proposing a similar building height?
I mean, theoretically, yes. Anything could be proposed. We would assess it at that point with respect to OSP policy and the Wilson neighborhood plan. I'm not sure which consolidation we're talking about. So yes, anything could be proposed. We don't know whether people will follow the existing zoning or will propose to amend it, as it is in this case. But we felt that in this case, the height of the building meets the intent of the plan, which is lower-rise buildings.
We can't be setting a precedent theoretically here.
Absolutely. Every time a development goes in, it sets a precedent. We look at this neighborhood, we look at Arbutus Grove development, and the current developments do set precedent. However, in this location, density is supported in the official community plan as a place that is close to schools, close to services, very close to downtown. It's managing that density so that it fits within the neighborhood.
I missed the comment on the relative height of Arbutus Grove. I wonder if I could have you repeat that information. I couldn't find it handy in the text.
Through you, Mayor, so the slide above shows the height of Arbutus Grove at 10.68 meters, which is the height permitted in the zone, and the height that would be permitted in this zone, they would exceed the height through the height bonus that is permitted in the zoning bylaw at all.
Thank you.
So I'll put myself on the list and then I'll go to Councilor Herford. 1,500 square feet of daycare is how many children based on licensing requirements?
Depending on the age of children, anywhere from 6 to 30. So it's it fits the maximum number of children in every age group, but it would depend on what age group the child care provider chose to.
And daycares require outdoor space, so is part of this lot going to be fenced off?
The part of the courtyard will be dedicated to outdoor space at 6 square meters per child, so that will be determined in the land development agreement.
The other question is, Councilor Stoner asked about the interior side setbacks, and you spoke to the parking garage meeting the 4.57, which is for that zone.
The parquet meets the 3.9, whereas the residential meets the
3.7.
4.47.
But the neighborhood plan says that buildings 3 stories and higher should have even larger interior side setbacks than what's contemplated. And so, are we still justifying that because we can get more common space?
Yes, there's a number of amenities or public aspects of this proposal that have public utility. So one is the fact that we are going to be looking how low the parquet can be set, so that potentially minimizes the impact. And then we're getting a public access around the perimeter of the building, which will potentially in the future connect to other developments as properties redevelop. And the neighborhood plan calls for that pathway to be at least 3 meters wide. And so in this case, that gives us enough space around the building. If the property is adjacent to it, redeveloped, then we would be looking for the same thing to even increase that kind of public space. But it is not meeting the plan fully in that regard.
I suppose the challenge here is that you're asking council to approve something that might be 4 stories or might be 3 stories. And one of them, I think the neighborhood would accept, and the other one, I think the neighborhood might have a problem with. And we have to make a decision tonight without actually knowing the outcome of that.
If I may, through the mayor, respond. What we asked the proponent to do is to show the most extreme scenario in terms of height of the building. So what we're proposing tonight to council is the possibility that the parkade could not be sunk. Otherwise, this project would have to wait for the next season to be reviewed.
Yeah. Councilor Rupert.
Have we put parameters around the traffic impact study?
Through you, Mayor, the parameters around the traffic impact study have been communicated to the applicant's civil engineer.
I would imagine that it ensures that it's done through peak school time, so we're not going to have a July traffic study to work from.
Through you, Mayor, those things would be specified in the assessment, yes.
Can you show the street right away, the picture that had the lane and the parking out of it, and then the cross section of the street?
Cross section of the street. This guy or?
Yeah. What's the 0.5 meter again?
The buffer, so this isn't currently what exists, however, we'd like to see a buffer between the walkway and the drive aisle. It's just determining how to put an effective buffer in that works with both the fire department and pedestrian safety.
Okay, so that's not proposed as a bike lane. And can you speak to the concept of daycare drop-off? The report sort of mentions there's a parklet out front and maybe the drop-off would be in the parklet, but then do you really have a parklet, a parking spot? And one of the things we wanted to see in the neighborhood plan was more sort of pocket parks and corner parks, that sort of thing. So I'm trying to wrestle with the use that we'll zone for and its ability to actually be accommodated on this site with this kind of density, which has had to sort of stretch itself and in the interior side setbacks just to provide parking for all of the residents. But then if the people using that childcare don't live in the neighborhood, they're coming in and they need to, it's not like elementary school where you can just open the door and your kids shuffle off. You have to just park and you have to go in. And then when your kid's screaming and holding onto your leg, it's not a 2-minute drop-off, it's a 15-minute drop-off. So I'm trying to understand the concept of how we see this working in this particular area.
If I may, through the mayor, that is definitely something that we've been thinking about as well. How is this childcare drop-off work? Because obviously people are not going to be pulling into the development, into the parkade to drop off the kids. And yes, they will probably have to park the car. They won't just be able to let them out. So we are going to be working through, if council approves going forward with this development, of how could that work. And it'll probably have to be a portion of that parklet allocated as a kind of pull-out area for the childcare. If the childcare continues to be a use in the zone.
Just given some of the comments on the parking, I'm wondering if you can comment on where you think we are policy-wise as a municipality. My sense is that we are very concerned about traffic safety and those sorts of impacts, but we are not necessarily opposed to adding friction to cars as part of a tool to incentivize people to walk more, to use active transit. And so a fast flow of cars with lots of parking isn't necessarily our goal, but safety certainly is. Is that an accurate?
From a staff perspective, yes, that sounds like music to my ears. We do recognize that we're going to have to balance the parking pullout with the parklet space. So I don't think we're going to end up with a lot of parking along that frontage. There will be probably enough parking for a few cars, and that's it. But there's always that balance of how do you make sure that it's feasible in the near term versus the long-term vision of having less cars on the road.
Let's see more hands.
Is now the time to share some thoughts, or?
Only if there's a motion on the floor. Councillor Race?
No first reading, and it's seconded, I'll speak to it.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor French. I'm going to put you on the list second, Councillor Shango. I'll go to Councillor Race.
Thank you. So, for me, first reading is not by a long shot final approval of the project. It is, and previous councils have become bored with my statement, but it means to me that it's in the ballpark, and there may be tweaks and changes, but it is worthwhile to go forward and continue on in the process. And so, at this moment, there are probably some tweaks in my mind. There are some other adjustments that might be made depending on other council comments. But I think it is something that, I think it's one of the ways that we are sort of aiming at this area, and the microplan was an example of it. Increased density, increased the different forms of housing, and this is consistent with that. So I am prepared to support first reading.
Councillor Gill? And then Councillor French.
Yeah, I went to the public meeting, and I guess I really appreciate that this is a small or local developer that feels really invested in the community. I like the step 5, and so I like a lot of things about this project. From the comments, it seems though there's some misunderstanding about what's being proposed, and even at that meeting, I felt like people were trying very hard to be open-minded, but also starting to dig in their heels a little bit. And I have some concern that, or thought that if there was another conversation with the developer, I think everyone kind of wants the same sort of things and has the same values. And that might be a faster path actually to get this done. So I'm not necessarily absolutely opposed to a first reading tonight. I think there are some tweaks required, but I'm not sure that will actually work in the developer's interest in this case. And that's the one thing I'm wrestling with a little bit.
Councillor French?
So I support first reading as well. I attended the information meeting and I read the comments. I hear the concerns of the neighborhood, and I think part of what's happening here is this proposal is right on the edge of the micro plan. It just goes right up to the edge of what I think the vision is for increased density in this neighborhood. I like the step 5, and I like the daycare, and I have an idealized notion that the daycare will be used by the people who live in the building and in the neighborhood, and hopefully we wouldn't have a lot of traffic dropping off children because those who are using the daycare are within walking distance from their home to this facility. I hear the concerns of the neighbors, and that caused me a lot of hesitation when I was reading through the package. At the end of it, when I reread the micro plan, I think that with some tweaks and with some of the concerns addressed, this project could work in this space.
Thank you. Councillor French, Councillor Stoner, and then Councillor First, and Councillor Anderson.
I'm willing to support first reading. I think one of the biggest challenges that I continue to have is we don't know if this is going to be 3 stories or 4 stories. And so I would question staff and the proponent as to whether we want to hold off on going to public hearing until we have clarity on that through the hydrological study, because I think that really does change a lot of what is being proposed here. So I will put that out there for consideration. And then definitely including the traffic impact assessment study is requirement, and making sure that accounts for the childcare traffic drop-off pickup, I think is really, really critical. I will repeat my sentiments that I am very thankful thankful for the proponent to bring forward a willingness to build to the Step 5 Energy Code. And so I think recognizing that and the efforts put there are really important. But this definitely borders on both in terms of height and then also an FSR from 0.6 in the micro plan to extending to 1.0. I think is really kind of pushing the limits of what the neighborhood's willing to go for. So those are my hesitations going into a second reading if we get there.
Councilor Herbert and Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I'll support first reading here with the knowledge that there's a lot of things to go out and work on that have been covered here. We definitely need to understand the full height of the building. The traffic impact study is crucial. There's a lot of concerns from both from the comments and from the comments made in person at the information meeting. And maybe there's solutions there where this will be add some solutions to the neighborhood. I'm open to that, and I look forward to seeing what the next version of this is. But I do acknowledge it is pushing the envelope on all the pieces, and I appreciate everyone's work to get it to this point. But there's still a ways to go.
Councilor Anderson.
Well, I think the efforts on the part of both the developer and the planning department are quite impressive in taking into account the project of the micro plan. But this is going through 4 versions and a couple of public input processes. The active transportation measures I find quite impressive and it seem to me workable. And I'd like to observe the keen enthusiasm and receptivity of the developer on with respect to heritage values and also green demolition, should those buildings be coming down eventually. That the proponent is also interested in other neighborhood amenities, exploring them in future. For example, the slough rehabilitation is part of that neighborhood and referenced in the plan. The developer is part of the neighborhood and it seems to me is interested to make it work. I remain very skeptical about the daycare and commercial amenities on Wilson Crescent generally, and I'll be interested to watch for further input and suggestions and tweaking, and the water table study, crossing my fingers with some benefits for the height that may come out of this, but I'll be supporting first reading.
Thank you, Council. I agree, the Passive House standard, this is one of the only builders that I've seen in the district so far that's building multifamily to this level, so that is fantastic. I do like the form and character, changing from the townhouse form and character to the apartment use. I think that is a great decision. The childcare, I think is workable, like Councillor French. Ideally, this is for the neighborhood, so people are walking there and then walking home and grabbing their cars if they have to drive somewhere, but maybe they're just walking downtown to work. So we can have that fantasy, which is great. I love that through this site we can start to think about site neighborhood connectivity, and that's a real bonus. I think the challenge is going to the 1.0 FAR and the density for me. I wonder if we step one of those buildings back from the street a little bit, we can figure out a way to accommodate the pull-in for the daycare without sacrificing the park. I think green space in this neighborhood is going to be really, really important because we do expect it to densify. It is a great location for density. It's close to everything people want to be close to. But with that in mind, the livability context for me becomes really, really important. So maintaining those wider side setbacks, maintaining green space where we can becomes really, really important. We know there's studies out now that the number of trees on a block impacts people's physical and mental health. So that connection between green space and health is starting to prove itself. So I think we have to be really conscious of that. It's easy to say, well, we'll just take some space from the parklet, but we're taking green space from residents when we do that. And when you choose to live in a higher density neighborhood, you know you're not getting your own yard, but then as a community, we have to provide space for those residents somehow. So I think for me, those are my outstanding concerns. The height, I'm hoping that we can lower the parkade as much as possible. I'm okay with the height, except that you're asking me to also make variances on the side setback and the density and that sort of thing. So it's too many gives for the developer, who I understand is trying to maximize their lot, but I'm not feeling like it's a fair exchange at this point. So I will support first reading, but I would like to see some changes when it comes back to something. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. First three readings. District of Squamish Property Tax Rates Bylaw number 2674, 2019. Turn over to our CFO, Christine Matthews, financial analysis.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. You already introduced us, so I'm going to pass
Trying to
it.
save you some time.
There you go. I'm going to pass it over to my very spiffy dressed financial analyst here, Mr. Russell, to walk you through the property tax
I
file.
do like your tie, Mr. Russell.
Thank you very much. It's not quite summer, but this is, thinking of summer and all that. So with that in mind, let's talk property tax today.
You don't hear that every day.
Summer property tax natural.
Property tax isn't, always the most enjoyable or upbeat kind of discussion. So, hopefully we'll try to spice it up a little bit. You have a report in front of you. I am not going to attempt to read the report because I'm quite sure that you will flip through it and have touched on the various salient points. I will provide a short presentation where we highlight some of the items that we think are important with respect to the tax bylaw, and we will provide an opportunity for council to provide comments and ask questions as always. So, onward. So just a quick reminder of Property Tax 101. Assessment is determined by BC Assessment Association, authority, I guess, sorry. The mathematics of calculating your tax is the assessed value of your property divided by 1,000 times the mill rate. That applies to all properties, and the mill rate or tax rate changes based on the property class. Tax rates are set by property class. There are ratios or multipliers which relate property classes to the residential rate. And in addition to this bylaw containing the municipal tax rates, it also contains tax rates for the regional district and for the regional hospital. So when this bylaw is approved, it will be setting those rates, and there'll be additional rates beyond simply the municipality's tax requirements. This table shows a comparison of the Squamish tax rates to the BC average. What we would like to point out on this table is that with respect to the residential, we are below the average. With respect to light industry, business, we are also below the average. We are below the major industry average with respect to the port, which currently is our only major industry. We hope to attract more major industry, and so we have set a rate for major industry category. The multipliers have gone down in the instance of business. From 2018, it was 2.73, and in 2019, the proposal is 2.63. Both those values are less than the BC average of 2.75. I don't have the slide with me today, but at previous meeting, we provided council with information comparing the business business rate multiplier for Squamish with other municipalities within the Sea to Sky corridor, and Squamish's rates compared favorably with all of those municipalities, although we were slightly higher than Pemberton. Would like to outline the overall averages for the various classes, tax classes, and highlight some key elements that we think are of importance on this page. First off, under Class 1 residential, we'd like to highlight the fact that the average assessed value of a residential property has increased by almost 10% year over year. That's fairly significant. Light industry and business are closer to 20% increase in assessed value. And increases in assessed value are going to have an impact on the overall amount of tax that a resident or business is going to incur. So for business, for example, we're looking at a 19% increase in the assessed value and an 8% increase in their tax, and there is a year-over-year increase of approximately $540 for our average business. For our average residential, the increase is slight. It's approximately $71, and that equates to about 3.3% on a percentage basis. As we discussed previously, averages can be misleading. We have some additional slides which outline the variability of averages and based on different neighborhoods within the municipality, and we will provide those to you shortly so that you can see how different neighborhoods are impacted by the proposed 2019 taxes. So this slide depicts again similar information to what was on the previous slide. It highlights the major groups that we're concerned with, and we're looking at the last line in gray, which outlines the changes in assessed value. And I think that it's important to compare that number with the actual top yellow line, which relates the change in actual taxes as a result of the setting of the mill rate, tax rate, and the adjustment of the multipliers year to year. So you'll note that the average residential is 3.3% and the average business is 8%. We're going to speak to you shortly about what one gets for that 3.5% or 3.3% increase in your utility bill not your utility bill, your tax bill, I should say, year over year. This slide depicts a breakdown of various services, and including utilities, so to give a full picture. The total for an average residential is $345 monthly, and the slide depicts what the value of various services are that total that $345 on a monthly basis. You'll note that some services don't have a dramatic tax draw, and others are fairly demanding upon your tax dollars. And part of that, and you may note that there's some services that you don't see on there, and that may be because there are some services that are provided that rely primarily upon user fees to pay for themselves. Now, we've included the utilities on this chart just to give a full picture of how much money is going to go out the door. The utilities are technically not taxes, they are user fees, but they are collected at the same time as taxes, and so often people think of them, I believe, in a similar manner. With that, we'd like to provide some additional information which shows comparison of average costs, I should say, or average taxes for different comparisons of breakdowns of that average that we depicted earlier. So in this case, representative single-family homes, and you'll note that, as we said, the average on an overall basis is a change of 3.3, but it varies widely. In some neighborhoods, the tax amount will be going down. In other neighborhoods, the tax amount will be going up, in some instances rather significantly. That's generally a result of changes in assessed value neighborhood to neighborhood, and that's going to be driven by desirability, market impacts, trending. My understanding is that in the past, Garibaldi Highlands went through a significant increase, Valley Cliff had gone through a significant increase, and in this year, it appears that Brackendale and Paradise Valley are showing significant increases in their assessed value, and as a result, those areas are going to feel a little higher tax incidence or change in taxes than some of the other residential neighborhoods. I'd like to provide a comparison of townhouses or strata properties, and we'll note that strata properties are going up approximately 9% on an overall basis, and depending on where you are specifically, downtown has seen a very dramatic rise in assessed value, and therefore the change is significantly larger than in the Tantalus area. So you will see a similar result with respect to business in that, again, the downtown area has seen a more significant increase in its assessed value versus the Tantalus area, and as a result, the tax impact on a business located downtown is going to be somewhat higher than the tax impact on a business that is not located in the general downtown area.
Council, I just want to remind you that sometimes percentages and statistics can be alarming based on the size of the assessment base. This is a prime example where you can see the assessment base for the Cleveland business that was chosen versus the Tantalus lease. $100,000 movement in both of those would have a different percentage impact on the bottom line. So it's often good in these slides to look at the monthly change in terms of true dollar value change for each property. Again, because sometimes percentages can really vary statistically depending on the bases and the size of the base when we're looking at them.
So at this point, that's the additional information that we would like to provide to council to consider in making their decision. The recommendation of administration is that council, or the request is that council provide the first three readings for this bylaw, and at this point we will be happy to answer any questions or address any concerns that council may have.
Council, any questions? No, I don't see any questions. Someone like to move a motion? Councilor Anderson?
Yes, I'd be happy to move the recommendation.
seconded by Councilor Briggs. Any discussion? Councilor French.
Thank you. Dating back to 1990, I've sat through a lot of budget deliberations in Mr. Chua's chair over there. And in that time, I saw more than a few budget processes that had staff clashing with council members clashing with council members, and tension-filled, bitter processes. This was not my experience, and as a first-time councillor, I appreciate that. The way the information was presented for us, I felt was adequate and well put together. And the discussion amongst my council colleagues, I thought, was respectful, polite, and productive. And the end result that we've reached, well, I wish I could say to my neighbors that their tax increases will be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5%. That's not going to happen. It doesn't align with our current realities in this community. Having said that, though, I think what we've landed on is very fair and is where Squamish needs to be at this place and this time in history. So I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Councilor Pettengill, and then Councilor Briggs.
I'd like to move an amendment if I could. We reduce the industrial rate in the community as a whole, but leave the industrial percentage rate where it was.
Which was where?
Was 32, basically at the BC average.
So sorry, you want to keep you want to move the tax rate?
Leave it major industry at the BC average. We moved it down to the port ratio, and I'm proposing.
So leave it at
BC average.
32.4.
Yeah.
Does anyone second that motion? The one that's going to second your motion tonight, Councilor Pettengill. Councilor Briggs.
Thank you. So this is for me, this is how the budget that we have already endorsed is shared amongst the different taxpayers in the community, and the different tax classes of taxpayers in the community. You know, I keep track through Vancouver media of some of the issues they have in the Lower Mainland and some of the ratios. And the ratios for me are particularly valuable for this because it relates to residential, and everybody else typically is a multiplier of that. And in some cases, they're quite extreme. And as Mr. Russell pointed out, our averages and our ratios are consistently, except for I think one, below the BC average. And so we are making ourselves, by doing that, I think we are making ourselves a very competitive place for businesses to locate and to continue to exist and thrive. So I think this represents for me a very fair way of sharing the tax burden amongst the different classes, and so that's why I'm supporting this motion.
Councilor Stoner?
I'll be supporting this motion as well for many of the reasons that Councillor Reese just spoke to, so I won't repeat them. But one thing that I think it did highlight for me going through this process is the importance to continue to lobby the province and BC assessment on narrowing down or expanding the number of property classes so that we can be a little bit more specific around how we allocate some of these taxes. That was a big eye-opener for me going through this process, so just wanted to speak to that.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
As a first-time councillor, I would just like to express appreciation for the orientation that staff have provided us through this process. It went a lot more quickly and a lot more smoothly than I recall as an observer in the audience in past years. I suppose things do evolve and improve over time in various respects. I also feel in a better place next year after we have begun a review of our zoning bylaw, which for industrial lands may have some implications for tax assessment, and I feel in a much more comfortable place to be able to review these with the help of the orientation we've received during this winter and spring.
Thank you. Councilor Pettengill.
I will be supporting this as well. I was hoping to make a small adjustment, but on the whole, I'm comfortable with this. I would echo Councillor Stoner's comment about some of the frustration in not having a more granular tax classes to meet the needs of businesses and residents more. That better reflects the actual need.
I think at this point we're repeating a lot of the sentiments of my fellow councillors, but I appreciate the work of staff through this process. I know that in the background there's been some technology hurdles, we'll just say, to get us the information that we need to make the decisions, and I think it's been a great process, and through all the discussions with my fellow councillors and mayor, it's been very respectful, and we'll continue to lobby for those different tax classes and their assessments that we can get from whatever we can get from BC assessment, I just support this.
Normally, I would support for a second motion, at least for discussion, and the reason I didn't tonight on Councillor Pettigill's amendment is that we don't have anyone in the major industry tax class. There's a placekeeper for now, and I think each year we should discuss it and debate it robustly, and I think that conversation happened at the table, and so didn't need to happen here tonight, but I appreciate the sentiment, Councillor Pettigill, and happy to support these tax rates. I think you were trying to share this across the different property classes as equally as possible. I think for me, it just reiterates why we have economic development as a key pillar in our strategic plan, because the more that we can diversify our tax base in business, light industrial, and major industry, the easier it will be on our residents. Right now, they carry a lot of burden, and it's hard to shift any of that burden away from them right now. So we are working on it. We have a ways to go, but we definitely have our focus as a council in that regard. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much to all your hard work, staff.
Thank you.
District of Squamish Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw. Back over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. Christine Matthews, Financial Officer for the district here. I will walk you through this relatively quickly. This is a bit of an administrative exercise. Under the community charter, we are allowed to have borrowing or short-term borrowing, basically for cash flow purposes, and this bylaw allows us to do that. It essentially recognizes that municipalities, a lot of our revenue is collected in the middle of the year, even though we're still providing services at the beginning of the year. So this basically allows us to get lines of credit and other forms of borrowing just to support general operations. We currently don't use our line of credit very robustly. We only had one incident last year over the Christmas period where we tapped into it. But our bank does require this bylaw to maintain that credit line, and so we're here tonight asking for 3 readings of bylaw number 2677 for council's consideration. Thank you.
Council, any questions? Straightforward. Someone like to move the recommendations? Moved by Councilor Rickford, second by Councilor Race. Councilor Race?
Well, thank you. I didn't really want to talk to the motion. What I forgot to mention the last time was the clothing. And I just want to be clear to staff that one thing for Mr. Buxton to wear a shirt like that, another thing to wear a tie like that. You can't put them on the same person. It'd be too much.
You haven't seen Mr. Buxton's socks, I don't think.
Wow, thanks for being so that.
You know they're going to be trading later.
I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up, District of Squamish Fees and Charges Bylaw, number 2012-2015. This is an amendment bylaw of bulk water and sewerage, pardon me, right? Number 2678-2019. And over to some staff we hardly ever get to see in council chambers. I'll let you guys know.
1 minute to do this. Uh-oh. That is for next week, sorry. All right, good evening, Mayor Elliott and Council. My name is Ben Konashenko. I'm the Technical Operations Manager in the Public Works Department for the district. With me I have Karine Ledoux. She's our Utilities Technician in Public Works, and we're here to talk to you this evening about the proposed amendment to the Fees and Charges Bylaw. This is in relation to bulk water and sewer tipping fees and services that the district provides to residential and commercial customers. As part of our service optimization program in Public Works, we have completed an analysis of the costs to provide these services and benchmarked them against other municipalities. Through this process, we have identified that current rates are not sustainable and are being subsidized from the district's operating budgets. While the increases we are proposing to these rates are significant, the proposed fees reflect the actual costs to deliver the service without subsidization from the utilities. So I have a couple of slides to show you. The first one represents, or is for bulk water sales, assuming an average truck size of 10 cubic meters or roughly 2,500 US gallons. Currently the rate is 54 cents per cubic meters. So for about 10,000 liters of water, it'll cost you $5 essentially. The proposed bulk potable rate we would like to charge is $39.14, which relates to about $400 for that same truck. Recently, 2018 actually, we started a program where we allowed commercial haulers and residential haulers, if they so choose, to use non-potable water from our irrigation wells. So the rate we've set for that is a little less than half. So for that same 10 cubic meter truck, it would cost you $140 to fill. If you flip over to the sewage tipping rate example, for a little background, we receive commercial sewage at the wastewater treatment plant from local haulers. The current rate is a little bit more reasonable. It's $11.77 per cubic meter, equaling $120 per that same size truck. Obviously, the trucks don't haul bulk water and sewage. And our proposed rate, sorry, that's a Public Works joke. The proposed rate is $16.11. It works back to $161.10 per truck. So as mentioned, these in our estimate are actual costs worked out through our benchmarking program, through talking to the 40 some other municipalities we compare to through that program, and using the finance department's business case template. So we would like to recommend that the District of Squamish approve this amendment to our rates and fees bylaw. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Question, Councilor French.
Yeah, I'd like to know, could you tell us, or give us some idea of who buys water from us in bulk, particularly potable water?
Through the chair, Councillor Race actually purchased some water for the sailing club last year, I believe. They were having a regatta is what it's called, and they needed potable water. They needed to supply potable water for participants. They didn't have a water service on site, so they went that route. Another example is developers and contractors doing dust control in the community. We've tried to push them more towards the non-potable type. Do you have any other ideas, examples?
Hydro seeding companies, well, they'll likely take the non-potable as well.
A community event as well. So, for example, a music festival, if you had portable washrooms, you need to fill up your potable water tanks with potable water to maintain public health.
What about commercial bottling companies? Are they a customer of ours?
Through the chair, I don't believe we have any commercial bottling customers, to my knowledge anyway.
And this is a little out there, but it came to me, I'm going to ask it. Are there any concerns around trade issues, like international trade agreements, global trade agreements, water as a commodity? This is a big increase from 54 cents to $39.14.
Through the mayor, we haven't been approached. The District of Squamish, to my knowledge, hasn't been approached in that regard. I know the province enacted a new water sustainability act in 2016 to address some of those types of concerns. That's about as much as I know about that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
I appreciate the price differentiation between the potable and the non-potable water. I'm just wondering if there's any consideration to like making that cost gap even bigger in an effort to try and encourage more people to use the non-potable water for uses that they could.
So, through the mayor, our goal with these rates was to make the services sustainable. So basically, like a water or sewer utility that's user pay, the idea is that the person using the service, essentially the rates will cover the full cost of the district providing that service to them. As far as I know, as a district, we're not, under the community charter, we can't make a profit in that regard, as I understand it.
Yeah, through the mayor. The team, the Public Works team, has done a very good job of providing background, supporting information, and justification for the costs that this fee is covering directly. And I believe that's one of the reasons too that the treaty, we're not selling water, we're actually recovering costs of providing bulk water service.
Thank you. Can I follow up?
Yeah.
In terms of sewage tipping, where else can folks go to tip sewage? Like where's the next closest spot? Just a cognizant that if we increase rates too quickly, is there a risk of potentially dumping?
Through the mayor, there's a differentiation that has to happen between commercial hauled waste and private, like residential type RV waste. There is a free RV dump for sewage at Canadian Tire, and I think Alice Lake charges $5 a tip.
I believe Canadian Tire is closed.
I called them today, and they're open for business again.
Thank goodness. We just had a letter about that, so thank you for that knowledge. Just doing it.
As for commercial waste, it's generally a septic hauler picking it up from someone in the septic field, for example. Essentially, it's a larger volume of stronger waste, and we want to treat that directly at the wastewater plant.
Councilor Pagano and Councilor Rupert.
I generally understand for citizens providing these services at cost, but I'm wondering, given some of the other conversation, is there an ability or should we be considering for, say, some music festival somewhere in Vancouver, they want a bunch of potable water, and we could look at that as a revenue stream, or is that somehow that sort of thing we need to do at cost as well?
Certainly, my understanding through the mayor is that we should be doing cost recovery. Also, that probably would start to bump into some of the other concerns around making water a commodity.
Yeah.
Councilor Rupert.
Thank you. Can you speak to the $120 a day, the special access rate for high volume customers during special events, and where that falls inside this cost recovery piece? I don't understand the economies of scale, I guess, in that piece.
Yeah, through the mayor. The intention with the $120 per day special access fee came about because during the last music festival, there was a large volume or quantity of trucks coming in and out the door. So there was some additional staff time that was required to deal with those haulers. So essentially, it's a cost recovery for that additional time that the operator has to spend with that truck driver.
So that's in addition to not just a simple, I was reading it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. You still pay the tipping rate, but you get your special access fee as well. And I believe if they're outside of operating hours, they pay for the overtime incurred as well.
Thank you. And what struck me during this was how shockingly low those water rates are. So thank you for doing this work. It seemed to be much needed. And, yeah. Good job. Thank you.
The best line in this whole report is utilizing the district's benchmarking results obtained via participation in the National Water and Wastewater Initiative. This is a great report. I'm so pleased to see these rates go up. You did use bulk bottled water as a comparison in your table. And so my question is actually through planning, because I have no question for you guys, this absolutely makes sense to me. Can people actually bottle water in our district, or have we banned that?
I don't believe it's allowed as a use in the zoning bylaw anywhere. There is someone with a license to withdraw, but not through our system.
So I can provide some clarification, Mary Elliott. The number we put in the table was for going to Costco, buying a flat of bulk bottled water. So that's where that number came from. There is one business that I know of that is licensed with the province to bottle water near, from a spring, a natural spring out of the ground near Colorado Springs.
But the zoning in that area would not allow them to put a bottling plant.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Bottled water is a scourge. Okay. I don't see any more questions. Who would like to
Move the recommendation.
moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor Herford. Great report. So glad with the benchmarking. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. District of Squamish Officer and Delegation Bylaw, number 2661, 2019. Are we doing these one at a time, or are they coming as a group?
One at a time, but I mean, I don't have to do a presentation if you don't want the presentation. If you want to just...
Go back and Some short presentation would be lovely.
Okay.
Public.
Well, we might not be doing it because the mouse disappeared. Good evening, Council. I'm Robin Arthurs. I'm General Manager of Corporate Services for the District of Squamish. And tonight I'm presenting to you Officer and Delegation Bylaw 2661. You last saw this bylaw on March 12th at the Committee of the Whole. As I had presented at that time, this bylaw establishes the officer positions for the District of Squamish. And the local governments have their officer positions established in the community charter. Council must appoint a corporate officer, which is myself, and a chief financial officer, which is Christine Matthews. And council also has the opportunity to appoint a chief administrative officer who carries out council's strategic initiatives and oversees the day-to-day operation of the municipality. And that is also done through the delegation bylaw, officer and delegation bylaw. This bylaw establishes powers that are provided through other various legislations, the Land Act, the Local Government Act, the Community Charter, just to name a few. Motor Vehicle Act is another one. And this bylaw sort of coordinates all of the delegated powers that are not existing in some of the other bylaws that we have, such as the traffic bylaw, the purchasing authority bylaw, and the land development procedures bylaw, which you're going to hear about next. So mostly with what's in this bylaw are, is on the screen, land agreement approvals, banking matters, execution of contracts authority, and approval as landowner, which is myself, to carry out any permits for construction and things like that on district property. New to this bylaw, the previous officer and delegation bylaw was amended numerous times, and it was quirky and it had some strange references in it, and it was time to clean it up. We wanted to coordinate our efforts with the planning department and we had some things that really should have been in the land development procedures around servicing agreements and things like that, that were in the officer and delegation bylaw. So we did a coordinated effort to decide, you know, which of the things, which of the delegated authority should be in which bylaw. New in this bylaw, though, is an increase in authority for the CAO around leases and licenses. We currently have 96 leases and licenses. Most of them are temporary or short-term or not-for-profit in nature. Things like we've got the Arts Council building, or we've got a lot of street vendors. We've got people that have some licenses at Brennan Park, small value. And you know, the intent of this is to make sure that these uses align with council's strategic plan, but also to take into account council's agenda load and try and, if things align with council's priorities, you know, take advantage of our delegation opportunity and let staff manage them. We still have about 18 or 20 leases that are large scale that council will be seeing. These are things like at the airport, Crystal Term, that's another one. Some larger scale, larger dollar value, and things where council always wants to consider the uses. Also new in this bylaw is a delegation to the real estate manager, which doesn't exist currently, for approval of temporary licenses that are shorter than a month and have a dollar value less than $2,000. And that's because we're seeing a lot of event licenses that have a fee attached to them, or street use licenses, food vendors, street vendors, that type of thing. And so that it's easier for our real estate, because they're doing a property license at the same time if they do, you know, get all the permitting in place at the same time. At the Committee of the Whole on the 12th of March, Council asked us to improve one of the preemptive clauses, and that was to make sure that any of the delegated considerations are done in line with the district's official community plan and council's strategic plan. So we have improved that, and it's included in the bylaw. Other changes is we've taken the servicing agreements, like I had said, put them in the development procedures bylaw, and as well we've been advised that we should be cleaning up the ambiguous language that we had around agency referrals. So we just said any agency referrals or ministry referrals. In fact, that creates some ambiguity, and we've made an exact list. There may be time to time where we're going to have to examine it and bring it back to council if it turns out that we're getting referrals that are ending up on a council agenda that shouldn't be. We've moved the liquor licensing referrals into the land development procedures bylaw, and that will go along with the cannabis as well, cannabis referrals. And our recommendation is that council consider first 3 readings of this bylaw tonight.
Council, any questions? Councilor Pegula.
Just wanted to clarify one thing I read. There's a process for an applicant to come before council and dispute a decision.
No, not in this, there's not.
Not in this one.
This is,
The land procedures bylaw
That's right.
does include a clause about that.
Okay, that's on page numbers. Okay. Sorry.
Any other questions? I think for me, the question I have is a question of reporting. So, council, one of the things I like about improving the delegation bylaw is that it makes our business more efficient. It keeps council out of sort of the nitty-gritty, so that we can function in our oversight capacity. But have staff thought about reporting from time to time so that council can see what's been approved through delegation and ensure that these bylaws are functioning in the way that we wanted them to, which is one of the reasons we included that whereas clause at the beginning.
I think that's a really good point. We can make a point of annually reporting on what the status of a lot of our licenses and leases are, as far as, you know, how has it gone, how's the process gone, have there been any unhappy customers, or is everybody happy? And the other thing, I think, as far as volume goes, we can likely report that in the annual report. You know, our tenures, our licenses, and our dollar values even.
And I think the dollar value is important, right, because we are bound to not give assistance to business, so making sure that we feel our rates are market rates, that sort of thing. So that would be great, in the same way that we get reports on all of contractors and how much we spent on each one. We see it annually, but it's a great way for us to provide that oversight and make sure that one contractor is not getting all the money because it's someone's brother's sister.
And there are, if I might, Mayor Elliott, there are some principles to the real estate strategy that around commercial leasing, so we'll be following those. We can measure up against those principles as well.
So I'll move this, first three readings, bylaw number 2661, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any further comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Yeah.
Land Development Procedures Bylaw number 2632.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Sarah McJanet with the Community Planning Department. Tonight, we are presenting Land Development Procedures Bylaw 2632, as well as a companion amendment bylaw to our Fees and Charges Bylaw 2012. This is Amendment Bylaw 2665. As we've discussed in Council Committee of the Whole, these updates are necessary to align our development procedures and fees with our new Squamish 2040 community plan, as well as to address some housekeeping items and some legislative shifts that have occurred since we overhauled our land development procedures bylaw in 2013. We discussed these proposed changes with Council on February 26th and further on March 5th. And on March 5th, Council moved staff to bring forward the bylaws for formal consideration. So they're presented tonight for the first three readings. Bylaw 2632, the land development procedures, will update and replace our current procedures bylaw 2229. This bylaw is a legislative requirement for us as a local government, as we've adopted our community plan and we have a zoning bylaw. So bylaw 2632 therefore outlines procedures for land development applications, including OCP amendments, zoning bylaw amendments, or changes to land use contracts or terminations, subdivisions, the issuance of development permits, variance permits, and temporary use permits. And the bylaw, as you've seen, also covers signposting, notification, development approval information, securities, issuance procedures, and delegations that we'll speak to briefly. The major updates that we've made in bylaw 2632 do align our procedures with our newly adopted OCP, and these include establishment of clear procedures for the submittal of development approval information for designated development approval information areas that are prescribed in our official community plan. We've also aligned the procedures bylaw and the fees and charges to reflect the new technical as well as the form and character development permit areas in the OCP. And we have proposed to align and expand the existing delegation authority for development permits, their approvals and refusals for technical development permits, and I'll speak to that momentarily. As a reminder, we've got the 6 prescribed areas in the OCPD where the district may require the submission of development approval information to ensure that we have sufficient information to adequately assess the impact of development or proposed activities. So these are the 6 areas, and accordingly, Procedures Bylaws 2632 establishes the detailed procedures for provision of this information. So this covers and applies to lands that are subject to natural hazard, risk, geotechnical hazard, where lands and activities may have potential to impact the natural environment within proximity to rail corridors within the community, or where, sorry, in purple that's hard to read, but where there may be potential impact to public realm views, sun access, or solar exposure to public spaces and parklands, and also where there may be traffic impacts. So the procedures bylaw outlines the information must be provided in line with specific terms of reference where we've developed them, and development approval information is prepared at the expense of the applicants, as outlined in legislation as well. This slide you've seen before. It's a repeat, and I'm showing it again to be very clear about the new development permit delegations that are proposed in the bylaw 2632. So through this bylaw, council delegates to the Director of Community Planning, Mr. Nishkis, to my right, the ability to approve or refuse standalone development permits for environmental protection, DPA 1. The exception to this is if there are any variances that are proposed to a streamside protection and enhancement area, the approval or refusal of such a permit would remain with council. Similarly, for development permit area 2 for flood protection, standalone permits, technical development permit refusals and approvals would be delegated to the director. As discussed previously with council, the full delegation of environmental and hazard DPs, this is quite a commonplace delegation for many BC municipalities. So in these cases, the permits would be reviewed by staff with expertise with those technical guidelines, so our engineers and environmental coordinators for those development permit areas. For form and character development permit areas that you can see on the bottom of the table, so for multi-unit residential, commercial, or industrial development, major form and character approvals or refusals would remain with council. And this would also include any major form and character DPs that also include environmental or flood protection guidelines. Those would be dealt with in an integrated way, and council would be reviewing those. Bylaw 2632 does propose delegation of form and character DPs for minor works as defined there, so additions, accessory buildings or structures, facade alterations, exterior equipment, landscaping, or furnishings and patios, cafes, those types of works. Also proposed for delegation to the director are amendments to existing DPs where no substantial alteration of form and character is being proposed from that authorized in the original permit. I would like to highlight for council during our discussion, there was some discussion around the feedback loop for approved development permits, and I'm happy to report that we've been working with Dan Griffin, who runs our and helps support our development showcase online, and we are exploring the opportunity and are testing out the opportunity to have issued permits remain on our development showcase and the ability to have public comments solicited through that online platform so that we continue to hear back from the community around approved development permits, whether they're delegated or not. So we're exploring that, and we'll come back to council with more information. I'm almost at the end here. So with Bylaw 2632, council also delegates the authority to the director to provide comments and recommendations to the province through the liquor and cannabis licensing process. And we have moved the delegation authority for liquor licensing that was previously in the Officer of Delegation Bylaw to this Land Development Procedures Bylaw. And so within section 17 of the Land Development Procedures Bylaw, the director would be able to provide referral comments upon notice of application for cannabis retail or liquor. And in the case of cannabis retail, the specific comments that the director makes include confirmation of zoning, business licensing, and then the views of residents that which is required where we're making comment on cannabis retail licenses. And those are solicited by the district posting an ad in the paper. And so we collect written comments that way. And further, within the staff report, you will note also, which was discussed in February, we have made a change to the list of exclusions for temporary use permit delegations. Previously, we had an exclusion for only liquor, but we've added to that list of exclusions such that cannabis, retail, and the primary sale of tobacco or e-cigarettes or vapor products are also excluded, which means that any temporary use application that includes any of those regulated substances, those temporary use permit applications would come before council. They would not be eligible for delegated approval by the director. Finally, we do have some companion housekeeping amendments for our fees and charges bylaw. These changes are proposed specifically to Schedule 13 of the fees and charges bylaw. This schedule covers all of our planning, lands, development permits, and services fees. So we've updated our development permit area references within the fees and charges. We've prescribed a new fee for development permit area 2 permits for flood protection, which didn't exist before our new OCP. We've also done some clarification around major versus minor development permits. We have not changed the fees, we've just sort of clarified what constitutes major versus minor in conjunction with the land development procedures bylaw. We have established a fee for amendments to housing agreements to cover the cost for district review and administration and all of the authorizations that have to go along with that. And we've also made some modest application fee adjustments proposed to reflect the required staff resourcing involved in the application review and processing. So this is for cost recovery. We've simplified also the development variance permit application fee structure so that it is $500 per variance. And also we've made some updates to the subdivision application fees for regular and bare land strata applications as well as phased strata plan approvals. Our fees were very, very low and they were also, there was some tweaking that needed to happen. And then finally we have an updated latecomer agreement administration fee increase to reflect the significant staff time required for managing those latecomer agreements. There's no formal public notification requirement for a procedural bylaw. We have provided updates on this project through our municipal webpage and through e-news blasts, letting people know about the changes to this, to these two bylaws. And with that, the recommendations that we've put forward are for each bylaw to receive first 3 readings. So firstly, the District of Squamish Land Development Procedures Bylaw 2632. And second, the Squamish Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw 2665. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Council, any questions on either of those bylaws? Council Panga?
So a couple, now I'll try. If I saw an applicant can appeal a decision, can a member of the public also appeal, or is it only an applicant can? I wasn't clear on that.
Through the mayor, the legislation requires that through procedural bylaw, local government include reconsideration, process for reconsideration of refusal or of a permit. And so it's those permit applications come from, or an appeal would be made by an applicant as opposed to a member of the public. So they're very much associated with the applicant.
And then, are there any examples where, rather than, if you're a wealthy developer, you can pay for your own planner, and I think that's sort of proposed here, and I think it's already our current practice. But are there examples where, if you want your development to move faster, there's just one queue, but you put resources into the queue, and then everyone in front of you, including you, moves through it faster? And the thinking I have here is that that provides sort of a more equitable benefit, and I am worried that there's a short circuit just for maybe large out-of-town developers, and recognizing that when a project goes through, even if it has its own planner, it's still having an impact on council time, on the rest of staff time, on public time, and so on. And so are there other municipalities that just have a single queue, but you can resource that queue if you want, as a developer?
Mayor, through the mayor, this bylaw does not speak to that type of resourcing, but I will let the director speak to that as a matter of policy practice.
So through the mayor, yes, we do on big developments sometimes utilize, so we will charge a fee for the application, the regular fee, and then on top of that, the applicant will pay the district additional funds for the district to go out and hire a planner in order to keep the process moving. It's not so, it has a dual benefit in that it does help the development because it moves along not at a slow pace, but on the other hand, it also makes sure that the district can operate our review and staff on other applications. So if that wasn't occurring, then we would probably have to put a planner sometimes on a full-time basis on one application because it has such a wide-reaching implications. In terms of practice for smaller developments, I don't believe that the bylaw recognizes it. Our fees and procedures bylaw, I believe, recognizes the possibility of this happening. But the only times that we utilize this function is for large developments. It is more for our own sake to make sure that other policy and development review can continue essentially unimpacted. I don't think it's the practice. I don't think it's the practice what we want to increase because it does have still consumes not only council's time but also staff time because you have to manage and supervise another staff person. So it has trickle-down implications on other staff too. I wouldn't recommend that we proceed at this time to explore a system how we can make this a more commonly used practice just because I don't think we have enough management staff to be able to accommodate it.
Any other questions? I have a similar question to Ms. Arthur's, which is, have you given thought to how we report on what's been delegated and approved on an annual basis?
Through the chair, as I mentioned, we are exploring the use of the development showcase to be able to highlight applications that have been approved and then also have that feedback loop and opportunity. So that development showcase works through our GIS where we can do reporting quite easily, and that is the source of if council recalls seeing sort of the development, sort of active development list. That's pulling from our GIS system, and so in that same way, we could do reporting so that you can actually call out and report back in an Excel template to show all of the delegated approvals and applications by project type.
Council, does someone want to move bylaw number 2632 for first three readings? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Rice. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Someone want to move bylaw number 2665? Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Next up is adoption of the 2019 to 2023 5-year financial plan bylaw. Don't think we need a report. Anyone move that? Councillor Rice moves 5-year plan, second by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I would like to take a 5-minute recess to clear my head and stand up. So we will reconvene at 8:13. Welcome back to our regular business meeting for April 16th. We're on to section 9, staff reports. And I'm going to speak slowly because the person presenting that first report is not in the room yet. So we have a few tender awards to approve tonight. First up. Good thing I brought us back from recess. Not very good planning on my part. I should start doing my community update too. Okay, we're live and we're waiting for you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I thought you were in the room and I sort of
No, that's
pulled everything together. So
My
you're up.
apologies for
We're
being
talking about the 2019 sewer force main project tender award.
Perfect, thank you. Jesse Morwood, I'm the Capital Project Manager for the District of Squamish. Presenting on actually 3 different tender awards tonight. I'll try to be brief and get through these fairly quickly. So the first one is the 2019 sewer force main project tender award. Specifically, staff is looking for council to approve the following resolution that we award this tender to Coast Valley Contracting, and the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute this agreement. Just a quick background, sewer force mains help basically move sewer along our network to the wastewater treatment plant. We use the sewer master plan to help us identify which projects to use, which projects to do this year. 2 projects are Judd Road Force Main and Valley Cliff Force Main as well. In coordination with this work, we're going to do the shoulder of Judd Road. This is a shoulder widening project on the south side of Judd Road. We went to BC Bid to advertise this work, and we received 3 compliant bids: Coast Valley, Pedri Contractors, and Complete Utility Contractors. The lowest bid obviously was Coast Valley Contracting at $724,336,000. Just a quick note of reference, this is a unit price contract, meaning that the final price can vary slightly. We do have budget for this project. The 2 budgets that we'll be using is the force main budgets as well as the active transportation project budget. Returning back to the recommendation, again, we're looking for council to award this tender to Coast Valley Contractors.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner? Councillor Rice?
Thank you. Just a quick question with regards to the overall budget that is available, which is 1.77, and the contract that's coming in at just over 700,000. Is there anticipation to increase the scope of the project to meet that budget, or what happens if that budget is underspent?
Yeah, through the mayor, thank you for the question. There are other costs associated with this work. Engineering is a big contingent of this. Thankfully, we did have a price estimate, and the tendered price was less than we anticipated, so we do have a surplus, as you've noted. We did have one project from last year that, when we went to tender last year, was much more expensive than anticipated, and we weren't able to complete it last year. So at this point, our hope is that we can add this extra surplus money to complete the project from last year.
Thank you, Councillor Rice.
Thank you. I was just curious which portion of Judd Road this is covering. The report said I think it was about 400 meters of it, but it just wasn't clear whereabouts that was recently.
Yeah, it's kind of a segment right in the middle. It's from a lift station to a manhole, so there's not great reference points, but it's north of Brennan Road by maybe 100 meters, and then goes past Cottonwood Drive, Road. So it's kind of this funny segment right in the middle. But again, for the shoulder widening is specifically from Brennan to Cottonwood to on the south shoulder.
Just, is there plans to go the rest of the way up to Government Road, for example, in the future? So I was thinking about the rest of the shoulder widening, when that might happen, because I know we've had other issues before on Judd Road where pedestrian traffic has been an issue, and it'd be nice to get this widened road, provide a little bit of safety for pedestrians. So good that it's happening with this one, but it still doesn't take you right up to Government Road and the sidewalk.
Yeah, through there, thanks for the question. There is an opportunity to, part of the reason we're going to Cottonwood is also Maple connects to Government, and that is I believe, a neighborhood way. So effectively we are connecting to Government Road, but we're connecting via Maple Way.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions?
I move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Rees. Any comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we're on to the vertical expansion.
Great, thank you. So I'm looking, the subject of this is landfill vertical expansion phase 3 tender award. Staff recommends that council approve the following resolution, that the District of Squamish award the tender for this project to Whistler Excavations, and the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute this agreement. So this is the third phase of our vertical landfill expansion project. Our first phase and second phase were done in the last couple of years, so this is kind of the final completion of it. Literally, we're finishing the wall that we're building, and what this is going to do is give us expand the landfill capacity, so that we'll be able to use it until 2027. So it's effectively building capacity for the landfill. We advertised this tender on BC Bid. We received 3 tenders. Whistler Excavation was the lowest at $1.649 million. We do have budget in our allocated budget this year. This potentially was a bit confusing in this report, so I just want to clarify. The work that we were allocated for 2019 was $2 million, so this fits comfortably with the 1.6 fits comfortably within our budget. We did have a carry forward from last year, and that carry forward helped us complete phase 2. So we basically just finished phase 2 recently, so we basically used up the surplus. Now we're into the 2019 funding. And similar to our last tender, this is a unit price contract, so the final price can vary. Nice and brief, bringing it back to the resolution, we're looking to award this tender to Whistler Excavation.
Councillor Peggy.
Just, there seemed to be quite a discrepancy in the 3 proposals, and I'm just wondering if there's any rationalization for why they vary so much.
Sorry, through the mayor, in the price?
Yes.
Okay. This happens in tenders. It does happen. Whistler Excavation, though, was the company that did the phase 2. It's a somewhat technical, and there was a learning process throughout it. So I think they were able to find some maybe efficiencies in how they did it and speed up their processes. So I think that gave them an advantage. There's also another project, the dike expansion, the dike upgrade project that we're working right now, and Whistler Excavation is also the proponent on that. So I think they saw some synergies with that project and were able to give us a great bid. Yeah.
Any other questions? So I'll move the staff recommendation, seconded by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Last but not least, and it was hard not to make a joke about building a wall there.
I saw you.
It's really tempting, but I don't want to, lower myself to that standard. So,
thank you for that.
The tender award for the annual road reconstruction.
Thank you. So what staff is looking for is, a recommendation is that council approve the following resolution. The District of Squamish award the tender for this, the annual paving program to Alpine Paving, and the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute this agreement. Quick background, this is obviously an annual program. There's various treatments we do on various roads around the district. I did include a list of the roads, but I'm not going to go through them in detail. We select our roads based on the pavement master plan, as well as we look for coordination with other capital projects, such as active transportation, transit, for example. The list that I did provide, the paving program is always a kind of a moving thing. We certainly try our best to kind of nail it down, but the list I provided is subject to change, although we'll get most of those roads done. We advertise, like we always do, for these big projects on BC Bid. We only received one bidder, and that was Alpine Paving, obviously. Despite it being the sole bidder, it was with their tendered price was within our budget estimate. And this came up last year, but it's very hard to get other companies to bid on these small tenders. We certainly do our best to get the word out there, but we only received one bid. The bid that we did receive was within our budget. It is a approximately $1.1 million contract. We did have a carry forward from last year that our intention is to add to this contract. Lastly, as we always do with our paving projects, we try to do as much this additional work as we can to kind of maximize when we're working in certain areas. So we are doing some shoulder widening on Tantalus Road in Guildford, as well as we're doing some intersection alignment at Loggers Lane in the Brennan Park. If we approve this tender, we'll start work in late May. Coming back to the resolution, we're looking for council to approve this award to Alpine Paving.
Any questions, Councilor? Councilor Bird and Councilor Anderson?
Thank you. In looking at this, I saw lots of small pieces that are going to be improved, and I appreciate that. And it just made me think about the works we have going on Judd Road now. The last two pieces involve that as well. And you mentioned that the diking project, and how can you speak to how that's all going to overlap? I understand it doesn't necessarily relate right to this awarding of this tender, but I just sort of see some stacking projects happening that involve Judd. And can you speak to that?
Yeah, through the mayor, great question. Yeah, there is some coordination. There is, I guess, multiple projects happening in a similar area. There's different components of it. One component is we're trying not to have the projects negatively affect the other. So that's part of it. We're always going to maintain single lane alternating traffic, so both projects can get by, so the dike project can get by, as well as locals can get to their homes. We also we have a communication plan that we're developing. We'll make sure all the residents know about the different projects. Sorry, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I get the sewer project and the paving all kind of happens together, but we'll be running the diking project at the same time. That's what I understand that piece. If we were going to be done by the time that project, by the time we start, or if there's going to be an overlap and how much that.
Yeah, through the mayor, there will be overlap. We haven't awarded this contract yet, so we don't have an exact schedule yet from our contractor. But inevitably, the way things are shaping up, there will be some overlap. The Judd Road will maybe be a month. The dike project, I think, is happening right now and expected to be finished like late September. So there'll be a month somewhere in there that there's going to be an overlap, approximately a month. Yeah.
In an earlier presentation on the paving master plan and this item, Clark Drive was among the projects on a proposed list, and that being derived from the paving master plan. I saw some surveyors working there about 6 weeks ago. I note that Clark Drive is no longer on this list, or isn't on this list, and I just wanted to make the observation that There are some future transit scenarios at Clark Drive, and as well as some active transportation considerations that might be reviewed or reviewed again. So I just wanted to note that about Clark Drive. I think that there is a conversation regarding the standards and plans for Clark Drive that do deserve some discussion. But I just know that it's not on the list this time. It is also a part of the land development agreement in connection with the Queenswood project.
Is there a question in there?
Just making the observation, I note that it's not there. I see that this
Do
is
you
a
want to
list.
know why it's not there?
Pardon me?
Is your question, why is it not there anymore?
Okay.
Through the mayor, as I discussed, we follow the pavement management plan, the master plan, which was an important key document in defining the roads. It's also, like I said, if you look at this table that's provided, there's a lot of other moving parts that we're trying our best to coordinate, and it's not just this year, it's next year, it's the year after. We are looking multiple years in advance and going, if we're going to do a water line in 2 years, let's do the paving then. So it's just a lot of moving parts. So specifically to the park, I don't know why it got dropped off the list, but these are how we decide these proposals.
Since I saw the surveyors at work, I thought I'd just raise that because I wouldn't want to be surprised without the opportunity for discussion around those issues at Clark Drive.
Thank you.
Certainly, Councillor Anderson has work going on there around the development, the waterfront landing development, because they will be reconfiguring that whole intersection into Valley Cliff.
Actually, it's the middle section of Clark Drive between the top of Scott Crescent and the top of Burner Drive. I believe the other aspects of Clark Drive, yes, are related to waterfront.
Okay. Someone move this? Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor River. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're on to the consent agenda. And I already know Councillor Scollin is going to pull some.
Yeah, I'd like to pull item A1, committee of the whole.
Okay. Anybody pulling anything else? Councillor Ben.
From the letters B2 and B6 and B9.
Any other letters? Okay. So, with that, we've pulled those. So, motion to approve the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Late agenda items. So those items that were pulled, we will do after. Where will we do those?
So under correspondence for the letters and then for the
Okay, we'll do those under 12 and 13. On our agenda is the late item that was added was the final collaboration agreement with Vancouver Coastal Health. Is Mr. Janet still here, or?
She is.
There are a few minor changes. There she is. We sped up, so we're keeping you on your toes.
Thank you.
Yes, we're on the final collaboration agreement. Is there any changes that you want to point out for council?
Yes, thanks, Council. So further to our discussion last Tuesday, based on the input that we received, I made some changes to the fourth bullet in the second page on the identified priority areas for collaboration. So we added sort of physical activity, paired it with mobility and accessibility, kind of clustered that, and added the integration of health programming, services, and facilities. In addition to the other areas that were clustered within that topic area, including active transportation, road safety, all of the kind of mobility and accessibility pieces. So we tried to bridge and connect those. So we're, and I've shared that back with the Vancouver Coastal Health. They were supportive and pleased with the integration and thought it captured it well. So if council has further feedback about whether that hits the mark or not, we can make further adjustments. We are looking forward to kind of finalizing the collaboration agreement and getting the sign-offs on it sooner than later, so, yeah.
Any questions, Council? Council Anderson?
We earlier had a presentation from Pam Gliatis from the Capilano University and Hotspot program. I just wondered whether they are full participating members of the coalition and informal network behind this agreement.
Through the mayor, the Squamish Settlement Services and the Welcome Center have not been a partner necessarily at the table in our work with Vancouver Coastal Health. But I will say that staff have met with Pam previously, and the work that they do actually at the Welcome Center and the partnerships in the community have informed some of the policy that we put into our official community plan. But I was interested, I listened into Pam's presentation earlier tonight and was interested in some of the work that was outlined in the partnership around looking at needs and gaps for new arrivals for Squamish community and how we can look to incorporate some of that information and work together in future. So we'd be very pleased to connect in with Capilano and to access more information and data and look at some of the health pieces that are part of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anybody want to move this? Moved by Councilor Rice, second by Councilor Stoner. Councilor Rice?
Good comment. And I did note the changes, and I was one of the people that made comments the last time. Thank you for the changes. Works for me.
Great. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Ongoing work. Appreciate it. Okay, correspondence. Let's do the action requested, and then we'll do the full letters after that. Okay, so letter from Mayor Gurman from Kitimat about their UBCM resolution on graduated licensing for motorcycles. For consideration. Trying to find this letter. What page is it on?
274.
So they're looking for a letter of support from council about a graduated licensing system for motorcycles. So council, this is at our discretion. So if you'd like the mayor to write a letter of support on behalf of council, you can move that motion and we can discuss it. Councilor Herbert.
Well, with these UBCM resolutions, do we take a position where we vote on them here, or we can wait, or in general practice in the past, and we just also add UBC?
So this one was already passed, but the province has not acted on it, and so they're looking for letters of support from communities to sort of light the fire again and try and move it forward. So certainly can, because the UBCM doesn't like people to bring forward the same motion twice if it's already there, and this was endorsed post-conference by the UBC Community Safety Committee. So it is before the province. They are including as part of their advocacy days, but obviously haven't made progress. So Kitimat's asking if our community would like to send a letter of support just to try and encourage the province to act on this sooner rather than later.
I'll move it for some discussion.
I'll second that. Go ahead.
So, on the surface, it makes a lot of sense. I think motorcycle traffic motorcycles love having come here, and if there's accidents, I think it has quite an impact. I've been through motorcycle driver training myself. I feel it's incredibly valuable. So on the surface, I really like this resolution. One of the other resolutions I pulled from Maple Ridge, though, makes me a bit hesitant that, unless you have the time to dig deeper into one of these have a bit of, I guess, a bit of hesitation without having a bit more time to dig into this, and I'm not sure that this particular topic fits into anything that we're strategically focusing on. So, yeah, I'm a little bit torn on this.
Any other thoughts, Councilor Herbert?
Yeah, on the surface, I like the general idea of public safety and more education around the vehicles that people are operating. Seeing as the province is by definition governing the province, I see issues in outlying areas where the training's not available, and then we start really restricting the access to proper licensing for motorcycles, given that it's such a small number in other areas. So I can see why the province may be having challenges implementing this, just on the surface, without having dug into it too far. But I do agree with Councillor Finnegill that we've got a lot of motorcycle traffic on the highway, and it does sort of speak to that. But I don't know what the nuts and bolts are behind this for the rest of the province, which is one of these things. So.
Okay, I've got two ho-hums. Councilor Stoner.
I'm willing to support writing a letter of support for this. I think the statistics in here are a little bit shocking. That motorcycles make up only 3% of BC's insured vehicles, but approximately 11% of road fatalities are from motorcycles. We have graduated licensing programs for driving other types of vehicles. I think it's important that there's a similar approach taken for motorcycles, so I'm happy to support the ongoing efforts from the district attorney.
There's a graduated system in place to a certain extent now. We have learners and restricted and unrestricted. I don't think this isn't about going from nothing to something. It's going from something to something more restricted. In my experience, I'm a motorcycle license 4 years ago now, and I went through steps where I had to ride with a supervisor, so as a learner, and there was a phase where I could ride I could ride by myself, but not at night, and not at a certain passenger, that sort of thing, and then went to another test to get to be open. So there are steps already that we are familiar with that process. So
Okay, well, I'll call the question just to test this. All those in favor of? All those opposed? Pettingill, Hereford, Anderson, Race, opposed. Motion carries. Okay.
I'll just move receipt.
Move receipt. Seconded by Councilor Stoner. It's getting late. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Councilor Race, for catching that. We had a letter from a community member that is about dog walkers and dog-friendly trails, and this has been very topical, so recommending that this letter be forwarded to our Senior Director of Community Services. Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. We had a letter about the condition of Paradise Valley Road. The recommendation is that we receive the letter dated March 30th and be referred to the Director of Engineering for follow. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Had a letter from Isabel Jordan about the plastic bag and straw ban, and I responded. Councilor Pettingill has followed up with a meeting, as has our sustainability coordinator. So we will refer this to the Director of Engineering and through him to Shannon for zero waste. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Race. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Okay. The minutes from April 2nd. you're here, Councilor Reese. Okay, Councilor Pettingill, letter number 2 from Port Moody about their greenhouse gas UBCM resolution.
Yeah, I think this aligns well with the resolution that we're putting forward to the LMLGA. I understand our process is that individual councillors attending vote, decide their own votes, but I just wanted to highlight that I think this aligns well with the resolution we're putting forward.
Right, okay. So move receipt?
Yes, move receipt.
Move receipt, seconded by Councilor Race. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Letter number 6.
This one I sort of pulled in combination with the motorcycle one, and just in this thought that it appears sometimes there's a lot more in the stories than you read in the letter. So some of the basic principles in the letter itself seem to make sense. So this is one I just wanted to flag for when we have discussion on UBCM about where we are, some of those issues of local autonomy, and just like to flag for our discussion of that one.
Move receipt. Second by. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. And finally, the letter from Rachel Shepherd about UN biodiversity targets and Canadian biodiversity strategy.
So my understanding is that we're having a delegation next committee of the whole on a very similar topic, and I'm just wondering if this is something that we bring and sort of touch on in that discussion.
That one is about wildlife corridors, and I haven't had a time to look at this one, but
It seemed to me there's a reasonable amount of overlap, and I wasn't totally clear, but I was just thinking that the discussion of the delegation might be a time to touch on that.
so what would you like to do?
I guess move that we review this when we talk to the delegation at the next committee of the whole.
Ms. Others?
And that delegation has been moved off. She's
Oh.
not coming next week. I'm not sure when exactly she's coming.
I thought it was in May.
In May, into May. So it'll be a few weeks, so not the next.
So basically,
So refer to committee of the whole to align with the discussion
Yes.
on wildlife corridors?
yes, thank you.
Moved by Councilor Pettingill. I'm not completely out of it tonight. Seconded by Councilor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you for that. Now we're on to the approval of minutes. Minutes from April 2nd. Councilor Stoner, did you want to?
Yeah, I would just like to make a request an amendment to the minutes from Committee of the Whole, April 2nd, section 4.3 on the Youth Strategy Community Engagement. There is a line in here that reads that there was a comment on lack of youth representation in community projects. And I think that was a capture of something that I said, but it was more in the vein of there's a lack of youth representation on the youth engagement strategy. So I'd just like a correction there.
Support that. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Mayor Elliott. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you for that. There's recommendations from the April 2nd meeting that we endorse the engagement opportunity, and that representatives of youth and emerging adult groups be added to the working groups forming a youth strategy. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor Hooker. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. And then on the arts, culture, and heritage strategy that council endorsed, the arts, culture, and heritage strategy process outlined in the report from Community Services dated April 2nd. Moved by Councilor Anderson, seconded by Councilor Pettingill. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. And finally, recommendation from April 9th, Committee of the Whole. We just did that. That the District of Squamish renew its Healthy Community Collaboration Agreement with the Vancouver Coastal Health for 2019 to 2021. And that subject to input received on that date, district staff finalized the Healthy Community Collaboration Agreement and continue to address identified joint initiatives, which was moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor Hooker. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Sarah was so efficient in getting that approved that we did it twice.
Well, this one has the second
That's true. Any business arising from the minutes? Okay, seeing none. Committee minutes and reports. So, motion to receive the Public Arts Select Committee minutes from April 3rd. We'll do that separately and then the recommendations. Yes. Moved by Councilor Wright, seconded by Councilor French. All those in favor? Motion carries. And then there's a recommendation from that meeting that staff work with Curtis Sauvé on the delivery of an artistic abstract crosswalk at 2nd Avenue and Main Street to the amount of $2,000. Councilor Rice.
Just a question is just where would that be funded from? Maybe we should specify in the resolution the source of funding.
Councilor French.
From the Public Art Committee budget.
Okay, to be funded from Public Art budget. Councilor Hurd, moved by Councilor Hurd, seconded by Councilor Stoner. Any further discussion? Yep.
Mr. Sauvé came to the committee quite enthusiastic about the project and with maybe a less than full understanding of the actual cost of the project. And he indicated that he'd be prepared to do it fully at his cost. So I think we're getting good bang for our investment dollar with this project.
Have you seen the design?
Yes.
Okay. I wondered if that was a surprise.
It's abstract.
Okay.
I think it looks great.
All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Next one from Public Art, what is their original motion?
Okay, so this is a proposed amendment that Council French had to put forward. So this is the motion that was passed.
Okay, so you want me to put forward the amended motion?
Yes, please.
That the Public Art Committee support the Squander Mural Festival to the amount of $10,000, $5,000 on May 1st, with the remaining $5,000 being issued upon the successful completion of 5 murals in the public realm around Squamish. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by someone. You?
I'll second it. But I was
Okay,
just
Councilor Race.
same comment, because I think the motion should identify the source of funding.
Same source.
So,
To be funded by Public Art Committee.
budget, yeah.
Budget.
So friendly amendment to me.
And I'll speak to it. Yeah, so the original motion was to just fund 10,000 in one payment. And upon reflection, we felt that 5,000 to get the project started and then 5,000 on completion just works better for everybody and brings a level of accountability that's appropriate. And I pushed a quick note out to the other members of the art committee and nobody expressed any concern with this change. So it's supported, I believe, by the rest of the committee members. And this mural festival has produced some really great art, particularly for our downtown. So if you're familiar with the Flamingo on the side of the Lotus Garden building, that was a product of this previous festival. The mural on the building in the back of Scott Hall is also, so it's a great art and culture addition to our community, and the committee's pretty excited about what's proposed for the year ahead.
Do we know the locations yet?
Boy, I don't think so, no.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Sorry. Opposed, motion carries. Whose job is it anyway to chair this meeting? We don't have any council staff in camera announcements. Open question period.
Good.
We were that crystal clear, were we?
Very, absolutely.
Thank you. Council or staff announcements?
I'm excited for a public information meeting that's being held tomorrow. Our district website says that it starts at 6:30 a.m. I want to reassure you, I will not be there at 6:30 tomorrow morning. It actually starts at 6:30 p.m. and goes until 9 at Sea Sky Hotel. It's information on the Malcolm Blind channel, proposed pedestrian lift bridge and marina. It's a great opportunity to get your questions answered. There will be a presentation at 7 o'clock. I encourage anybody that's interested to attend.
Thank you for your reminder. Any other ones? Councilor Stoner?
I'll just speak to Saturday. I attended, or I think it was Saturday, the Repair Cafe. It's a bit of a blur. But the District of Squamish, in collaboration with Squamish Can, puts on the Repair Cafe every year, which is an awesome event. They had a handful of volunteers there, people with sewing machines, jewelers, folks that are able to do small appliances and bike repairs, and you can just bring your stuff in and get it fixed for free. And it was a great event, well attended, and a wonderful part of our community.
Sunday. Anyone else? Councilor Anderson?
May I ask, are there plans for a Reuse It Fair event this spring? I haven't seen any advertisements, just wondering.
Yes, I have seen the advertisements.
Oh, good,
It's
okay.
coming up.
June, usually it's a little bit earlier than spring, but maybe we'll have better weather.
Another great event to keep things out of our landfill. Anyone else? Councilor Bago?
I had the pleasure of seeing between shifts Don't Dress for Dinner. It's a little bit racy, but very, very fun. I'm sort of a little bit newer to community theater, but the crew here is just incredible. It's really fun.
Yeah, I heard that too. It's hilarious. All right, I got a slew of them. April 7th, I helped present the awards at Squamish Minor Hockey. I got to shake the hands of like 180 kids. There was a huge turnout. And I just wanted just sincere gratitude to all the parents who volunteers, coaches, managers, schedulers, drivers. There was just amazing community spirit there that night, and so appreciative of everything that they put into that. April 8th, I attended the RCMP Volunteer Appreciation Night along with Councilors Pettingill and French and our CAO. And again, this is another great group of citizens, many of whom have volunteered for like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It's just amazing. And they volunteer in the auxiliary, the community policing team, as well as victim services. So the RCMP couldn't do all the events that they do without them. And also the folks in victim services support our community in times of great need or tragic circumstances, and they volunteer to do that, and they're just an amazing crew. So my sincere gratitude to all of them. On April 10th, I was at North Yard Cider. Darn, that was hard. For the launch of their heirloom cider and a goodbye to a board member. Councilors Anderson and Stoner were also there. So there was purpose in attending, not just to try the cider, but so Squamish Can has always had the fruit tree program, and this last time they partnered with Soulscapes Landscaping, who picked all the fruit, and then Soulscapes found partners to take the fruit, and one of them was North Yard Cidery, and they have made a local heirloom apple cider. It was delicious. Unfortunately, that night we were also saying thanks and so long to Michelina Hunter, who was a Squamish Can board member and absolutely integral in the startup of our Food Policy Council locally. And she and her partner Darwin are looking for land on the island. And so once they find that land, they'll be departing. So this makes our agricultural strategy even more important because we have to help young farmers like them stay in the valley. So bittersweet to say goodbye to her. She's done so much for us. I too was at Brennan Park over the weekend. So on Saturday, it was Soccer Fest. It was the Children's Clothing and Gear Swap, and it was the Repair Cafe. Like, Brennan Park was a hub and a hive of activity. It was so great. Our Brennan Park staff were amazing at managing the crowds, and a huge shout out to Shannon White, our sustainability coordinator, for putting on the Repair Cafe. I had this necklace fixed. See, Jenna got a necklace fixed. I got all my mending done. My 11-year-old said, "This is embarrassing, Mom. You should know how to do this yourself." And I said, "I do know how to do some of it. I just don't want to." And someone else did. So we got all our mending done, and we took a lamp that unfortunately was not repairable. And so they handed it back to my daughter and said, "You can take it to the table in the lobby and take it apart." And so the additions to the repair cafe was the tinker table. And they had all these things there that kids could deconstruct. So my youngest daughter deconstructed her lamp with great joy, and my other daughter deconstructed a circular saw. And she spent an hour doing that. So it was tremendous. And I think trying to encourage people to repair instead of throw out is really valuable. I think we've lost the skills. And so this is one of the best events of the year, so thanks to our staff for that. Last night, our amazing library, our children's librarian Kate ran the Reading Link Challenge. So this is open to all grade 4 to 6 students from the elementary schools. All 7 schools were there with a team. Basically they have 5 or 6 books they have to read, and then it's like a quiz, like trivia night for kids, super fun. And they are all there and they have to get the answers. They put their heads down and they're trying not to whisper too loud so that they give the answer away to the other team. So it was a very tight race. Winner was Valley Cliff, and tied for second was Squamish Montessori on the Highlands, and third went to Squamish Elementary School. So kudos to our library. They've done this event year after year, and it's so much fun. And then this coming Thursday at 3:30, it's the fastest picker competition. It's council against the high school eco club. Is the media joining?
Oh, we will be. We'll see you there.
We have the media on our side. Who's currently holding the title? Does anybody know?
We are.
We are?
Yeah.
Oh, we're defending a title. So.
Yeah, on our side?
The media is on our side, yeah.
No, they were on their own. They're not.
Oh, they're a rival. I thought they, oh, well, okay. You're on. We're gonna have to take it back. And then the students, of course, are there. So this is the high school eco club, which were instrumental in our straw and plastic bag ban. So that'll be fun. Those are all my announcements. Motion to terminate. Moved by Councilor Harper, second by Councilor French. All those in favor? Those motion carries. Thank you, everyone.